One introduction RAWSEP view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view: PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXZF November 8, 2025 Hungary gets reprieve from Trump, not Americans who are hungry. In Webisode 57DHXZF 1 KC means snake oil new rules aim to broaden appeal of HSAs. The New York Times to pay for KC means alternative snake oil cures 2 Georgia. In an upset Democrats oust 2 Republicans on the Georgia utility board. The New York Times 3 Idaho. As Idaho grows ever redder, Boise worries about its isolation. The New York Times 4 Trump being Trump, how the Trump administration is giving even more tax breaks to the wealthy. The New York Times 5 Trump versus clean energy. Trump can reconsider permit for offshore wind farm. Judge rules. The New York Times 6 Brazil forward climate COP30 begins in Brazil. The New York Times 7 Jamaica solar power after Hurricane Melissa. Solar power kept the electricity on for some Jamaicans. The New York Times 8 Science how many trees a day do we cut down for paper? The quiz for kids trivia games. The Guardian 9 Canada Carney survives 2 confidence votes on budget quashing fears of winter election. Canada. The Guardian 10 Brazil how thousands of fossil fuel lobbyists got access to UN climate talks and then kept drilling fossil fuels. The Guardian 11 Brazil. The Lula Balancing Act. COP30 Amazon summit juggles climate and social priorities. COP30. The Guardian 12 Brazil. Over 100 U.S. leaders to attend COP30 climate summit as Trump stays away. COP30. The Guardian 13 United Kingdom RAWSEP view tax the rich rather than the poor. From the article headline, increase taxes for working people or make the very rich pay their fair share. The answer seems obvious, but not to Labor. Dan and Jane Striskenderija. The Guardian 14 China poised to lift ban on chips exports to European car makers after U.S. deal. Automotive industry. The Guardian headlines main content. 1 KC means RAWSEP view health savings accounts HSAs can be used. Snake oil cures. From the article headline, new rules aimed to broaden appeal of HSAs. The New York Times RAWSEP interjection to pay for KC means style alternative snake oil cures. 2 Georgia. In an upset Democrats oust 2 Republicans on the Georgia utility board. The New York Times RAWSEP view with more Democrat board members' decisions to lower utility bills by using clean energy such as wind, solar, geothermal, and heat pumps are more likely to be made by this Georgia utility board. This Georgia utility board could decide to stop industrial wood burning and could decide to subsidize PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors to hang from the eaves of near neighbors to measure the pollution from nearby indoor residential wood burning. In that way, the Georgia Utility Board could help provide pollution data as evidence to prove that indoor residential wood burners need to be shut down when they exceed World Health Organization PM 2.5 levels of 5 micrograms per cubic meter. Wind and solar are cheaper than the dirty energy of fossil fuels and the dirty energy of wood burning, and those cost savings could be passed on to consumers. Lowering consumer energy bills. Storm damage costs are probably initiated by global warming, so using clean energy, which slows climate change, may in the long run lower energy costs for Georgians. It looks like as of Tuesday, 2 of the 5 seats on the utility board are Democrat, and 2 more seats on the utility are up for election in 2026 that could yield a majority of 4 of the 5 seats on the Georgia utility board in Democratic hands by 2026 if all goes well. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP 4. Brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times November 4, 2025. In an upset Democrats oust 2 Republicans on the Georgia utility board. The races for 2 of the 5 seats on the Georgia Public Service Commission are seen as a bellwether for the midterms. Alicia Johnson, a Democrat, defeated Tim Echols, a Republican who had held a seat on the Georgia Public Service Commission since 2011. In an upset Democrats ousted 2 Republican members of the Georgia Utility Board on Tuesday. The closely watched races for 2 of the 5 seats on the Georgia Public Service Commission had been viewed not only as a referendum on rising electric bills, but also as a bellwether for the 2026 contest for governor and U.S. Senate. Since 2007, no Democrat has served on the commission, whose members have 6-year terms, but the 2 Democratic candidates tapped into anger over rising electric bills at a time when prices have risen sharply across the country over the last 2 years. The commission has approved 6 rate increases for Georgia Power, the largest electric provider in Georgia. The obscure but powerful commission is ordinarily an electoral afterthought. In 2020, however, a federal lawsuit contended that the statewide elections for commission seats, which represent geographic districts, were unfair to black voters. An appeals court eventually ruled against the plaintiffs, but the legal battle delayed elections for the commission that set the stage for races on Tuesday, the only statewide elections in Georgia this year. According to the Georgia Secretary of State office, Peter Hubbard, a Democrat, defeated Fitz Johnson, the Republican incumbent, who was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp in the race for the seat representing Greater Atlanta. In the other contest between candidates from northeastern Georgia, Alicia Johnson, a Democrat, defeated Tim Echols, the Republican incumbent who has held office since 2011. Democrat Hubbard is a clean energy consultant. Democrat Dr. Johnson is a health management and community development executive. Energy costs rose sharply around the country in 2022, driven by a spike in natural gas prices when Russia invaded Ukraine. In Georgia, additional factors in the high utility bills in Georgia have included $17 billion in cost overruns from nuclear generators and new infrastructure to support it, anticipated surge in electricity demand from data centers. Governor Kemp and the Utility Commission praised a deal this year with Georgia Power to freeze base rates for 3 years. Critics, though, contended that ratepayers would still have to cover hundreds of millions of dollars in fuel and storm damage costs. Democrats criticized Republicans for embracing fossil fuels to generate electricity for data centers, as well as for backing away from clean energy in lockstep with the Trump administration. Heading into Tuesday, Republicans had fretted over turnout given that municipal elections in Atlanta and other Democratic strongholds were also being held. Republicans were also anxious that a Democratic victory in even one of the utility races could be a harbinger for 2026 when elections will be held for governor, the U.S. Senate seat held by John Ossoff, a Democrat, the Republican-controlled state legislature, and in 2026 there will be elections for 2 more seats on the 5-seat Utility Commission. Those anxieties prompted attempts by Governor Kemp and other Republican officials to rally the party faithful 3. Idaho. As Idaho grows ever redder, Boise worries about its isolation. The New York Times. As Idaho grows ever redder, Boise worries about its isolation. 2. City councilors won election again on Tuesday, though their support for a pride flag at City Hall had sparked challenges from the right. Still, the Idaho deep embrace of Trump has the city worried. The Idaho state capital in Boise, where fiercely conservative lawmakers are passing laws that encroach on the Boise Independence. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, November 7, 2025. Amid the hoopla over gains that Democrats made across the country, voters in Boise, Idaho registered their own modest form of defiance this week. They are elected 2 city council members who had helped raise a rainbow pride flag outside City Hall, a small sign for now that the Idaho biggest blued can remain independent as the deep red expanse grows around it. A year into the second Trump administration, Boise has become a front line of sorts, an island surrounded by a state that is growing ever more Trump-tinged crimson. The 2 councilors, Colin Nash, the council president, and Jimmy Halliburton, faced opponents on Tuesday who had accused them of needlessly antagonizing the conservative state legislators working just 2 blocks down North Capitol Boulevard. The challengers lost badly, but that does not mean the Boise moderates and liberals feel secure. The grandfather of my wife was in the Idaho legislature in the 1950s, and when you read his journal, it is so eerie how the same conversations played out, except then they were talking Red Scares, said Nash, a former member of the Idaho House of Representatives. Maybe now it is just a little more visible. Idaho is a case study in geographic sorting of self, a trend across the country in this land of sagebrush and reliance on self. That means a state that was already solidly red is becoming a magnet for fans of the Trump political movement and a laboratory for his policies. I hear people moving here talking about themselves as political refugees, especially people from Democratic states on the Pacific Coast, said Jason Monks, the Idaho House Majority Leader and a Republican from Meridian, Idaho. It is hard to overstate Republican dominance in Idaho, even with the victories on Tuesday by the incumbents in Boise. A Democrat has not been elected to statewide office since 2002, or to the governorship since 1990, and Republicans have held supermajorities in both legislative chambers since 1993. Marchers, many in Trump-branded clothing, were holding American flags. Rally before a sign that reads, "Jesus loves you, we are all Charlie now." After the Kirk assassination, Idahoans converged on Boise for the God Country March. Idaho is also, by most statistical measures, booming incomes, our rising state finances are sound, and the population jumped 17% from 2010 to 2020, and by another 8% since 2020. A lot of those people are coming from other parts of the West, and they are bringing to Idaho a different kind of conservatism for generations. The Republican Party in Idaho was dominated by 2 types of figures: farmers who practiced a good fences make good neighbors form of frontier libertarianism, and transplants from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints whose commitment to smaller government and family values made room for funding public schools. An annual Boise State University survey shows that people who have moved to Idaho in the last decade more often describe themselves as strongly conservative than longer-term residents. Do these newcomers, often aligned with evangelical movements, are pressuring state leaders to stay on the cutting edge of conservative policymaking? We have weighed on certain issues. Do we want to be the first ones here because this is going to be litigated? We are a small state with a small budget, so should we just let Tennessee run with this? Monks said a growing number of his members, he continued, are saying, "I do not care, we are going to do it." Monks noted that Idaho Governor Brad Little, perhaps apocryphally, had been credited with coining the acronym COWS to describe these newcomers, people from California, Oregon, and Washington, who are trading firmly blue states for a red one. A chapter leaders at Boise State of the conservative youth group Turning Point USA fit that description. For Trump being Trump, how the Trump administration is giving even more tax breaks to the wealthy. The New York Times, how the Trump administration is giving even more tax breaks to the wealthy. The Treasury Department and Internal Revenue Service are issuing rules that provide hundreds of billions of dollars in tax relief to big companies, and the ultra-rich congressional Republicans celebrated the signing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July. The legislation provided roughly $4 trillion in tax cuts. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, November 8, 2025. With little public scrutiny, the Trump administration is handing out hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts to some of the most profitable companies and wealthiest investors in the U.S. The Treasury Department and Internal Revenue Service, through a series of new notices and proposed regulations, are giving breaks to giant private equity firms, crypto companies, foreign real estate investors, insurance providers, and a variety of multinational corporations. The primary target, the administration, is rapidly gutting a 2022 law intended to ensure that a sliver of the most profitable corporations in the U.S. pay at least some federal income tax. The provision, the corporate alternative minimum tax, was passed by Democrats and signed into law by President Biden. It sought to stop corporations like Microsoft, Amazon, and Johnson & Johnson from being able to report big profits to shareholders, yet low tax liabilities to the federal government. It was projected to raise $222 billion over a decade, but the succession of notices the Treasury and IRS have issued beginning this summer means the tax could bring in a fraction of that. These breaks come in addition to the roughly $4 trillion package of tax cuts that Trump signed into law in July. The legislation, passed entirely by Republicans, heavily benefits businesses and the ultra-wealthy. It is projected to add trillions of dollars to the federal deficit and came with steep cuts to health care for the elderly and food stamps for the poorest Americans. With its various tax relief provisions, the administration is now effectively adding hundreds of billions of dollars in new breaks for big businesses and investors. The Treasury is empowered to write rules to help the IRS carry out tax laws passed by Congress, but the aggressive actions of the Trump administration raise questions about whether it is exceeding its legal authority. Trump and congressional Republicans have attacked federal workers as instruments of the deep state exercising power power beyond anything authorized by the law, and now the administration is doing the same thing several tax experts said, undermining laws that hit the ultra-wealthy and big companies. Treasury has clearly been enacting unlegislated tax cuts, said Kyle Pomerleau, a tax economist at the American Enterprise Institute, a right-leaning think tank. Congress determines tax law. Treasury undermines this constitutional principle when it asserts more authority over the structure of the tax code than Congress provides it. The Treasury and IRS have rolled back a crackdown on an aggressive tax shelter used by big companies, including Occidental Petroleum, and AT&T, that amounts to another $100 billion in cuts, and likely far more according to tax advisors. Changes like these are not widely publicized by the Treasury, but are closely followed by tax planners for the biggest corporations in the U.S. who are applauding the new guidelines in the regulations to administer the minimum tax. This summer, Blackstone succeeded. Much of the recent guidance grants the Blackstone requests, giving private equity firms enormous flexibility to calculate their bills. A Blackstone spokeswoman declined to comment. The regulations also provide new flexibility for insurance companies in using so-called tax losses. For one, the new rules permit some insurers to use those losses to reduce their bills under the minimum tax, even for prior years. They are effectively repealing the statute, said Monty Jackal, a tax lawyer and former IRS official, referring to the minimum tax law. 5. Trump versus clean energy. Trump can reconsider permit for offshore wind farm. Judge rules. The New York Times. Trump can reconsider permit for offshore wind farm. Judge rules the decision dealt a setback to the developers of South Coast Wind, a 141 turbine project off Nantucket, Massachusetts. The White House had ordered federal agencies to draft plans to thwart offshore wind power, a source of renewable energy that Trump has criticized. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, November 4, 2025. A federal judge in Washington ruled on Tuesday that the Trump administration may reconsider the Biden-era approval of South Coast Wind, a wind farm planned off the coast of Nantucket, Massachusetts. The decision dealt a setback to the developers of the project, a joint venture between the energy companies EDP Renewables and ENGIE. It handed a victory to the White House, which has ordered a half-dozen federal agencies to draft plans to thwart offshore wind power, a source of renewable energy that Trump has criticized as ugly, expensive, and inefficient. The decision would effectively allow the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management at the Interior Department to evaluate again its approval of the construction and operations plan of the project. The agency had approved the plan on January 17, 2025, 3 days before the Trump second term began. As proposed, South Coast Wind would include 141 turbines in federal waters about 23 miles south of Nantucket. When completed, it would generate up to 2,400 megawatts of energy, enough to power more than 840,000 homes in New England. The project is being developed in 2 phases and has not yet started construction. The first phase, known as South Coast Wind 1, would provide power to both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Michael Brown, the chief executive of South Coast Wind, said in a statement that the company was disappointed by the ruling. We are currently assessing the implications of the decision and will consider all appropriate next steps, including the pursuit of legal remedies, he said in an earlier filing in the case. Brown said the company had already spent more than $600 million on the project when making these investment decisions. South Coast Wind understandably expected that the federal government would follow valid statutes and regulations setting out criteria for issuance of permits. He wrote, soon after returning to the White House, Trump issued a sweeping order to halt all leasing of federal lands and waters for new wind farms. His administration has since gone after several wind farms that had been given federal permits by the Biden administration and were either under construction or about to start. In April, the Interior Department ordered that work be stopped at Empire Wind, a $5 billion wind farm off the coast of New York that had received all necessary approvals from the Biden administration and was 30% completed after several weeks in negotiations with Governor Kathy Hochul, Democrat of New York. The administration allowed Empire Wind to proceed. White House officials suggested they had relented only after Ms. Hochul agreed to approve new gas pipelines in the state. Ms. Hochul denied that any such deal had been made. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, said that the ruling on Tuesday could set a dangerous precedent that future administrations could use to block other energy infrastructure if the government can come back and invalidate projects that have already gone through a rigorous permitting process by establishing new bizarre hoops to jump through. It opens up a box of Pandora for all energy projects looking for federal permits, Markey said. 6. Brazil forward climate COP30 begins in Brazil. The New York Times. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, November 8, 2025. World leaders have gathered in Brazil for COP30 2025 Global Climate Summit. Basically, it is the World Cup of negotiations over global warming. The venue is still under construction. From Belém, Brazil is a city on the edge of the Amazon where the talks will unfold over the next 2 weeks. It was 10 years ago at COP21 near Paris that nearly every country committed to the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Compared with pre-industrial times today, the 1.5 degree target is all but out of reach. Even 2 degrees is looking less and less likely. So, what is in store for the 2025 negotiations? In short, the leader of Brazil are hoping to wrangle funding commitments from wealthy nations to help address climate change in developing countries. The broader goal, as ever, is to turn various climate pledges into action. One conspicuous absence from the 2025 talks is the United States, which has moved to exit the Paris Agreement for a second time, but some say that is not such a bad thing, at least from a productivity perspective. Without Trump administration delegates leaning on other countries to abandon their plans to phase out fossil fuels, the thinking goes the talks could go rather smoothly this year. The Trump team approach to another global climate negotiation, the International Maritime Organization plans to price carbon emissions in the shipping industry, was diplomatic hardball. Last month, diplomats from around the world were poised to approve a years in the making deal to reduce pollution from cargo ships. Then Trump officials showed up and swiftly killed the deal. U.S. representatives threatened and told Caribbean diplomats that they could be blacklisted from entering the United States. Other threats to nations ranged from tariffs to sanctions to the revocation of diplomatic visas, according to 9 diplomats at work. But the hardball tactics stunned the delegates in attendance. This is really using a cruise missile to address a traffic violation. The United States has always thrown its weight around in global negotiations. But the tone and tenor of the behavior of Trump America, in particular the use of personal intimidation, seem to represent an escalation unique to the Trump second term. No top Trump administration officials are expected at COP. Even Democratic lawmakers who had planned on attending are struggling to get to Brazil because the government shutdown is preventing them from using federal funds. Senator Sheldon White House, the most outspoken climate hawk in the Senate, said it was just as well that the Trump administration was skipping the conference. It is somewhat of a relief that at least they are not going down there to bully and torment people who are trying to do good work. He said with that the negotiations will soon begin. Morning mist in Carajas National Forest in Brazil. The Brazil proposal is a new type of fund to protect tropical forests. To mow down a forest is usually lucrative. You can sell the wood and then clear areas for animals to graze or to mine for valuable ores or to grow corn or other crops year after year. This is how most of the tropical rainforests in the world have vanished in the past 25 years, including in Brazil. But the country is trying to change that. At COP30 in Belém, Brazil plans to announce an ambitious new fund designed to pay countries to keep their tropical forests standing. As many as 74 countries with tropical forests stand to gain a total of $4 billion per year if they leave their forests alone. 7 Jamaica solar power after Hurricane Melissa. Solar power kept the electricity on for some Jamaicans. The New York Times. 8 Science. How many trees a day do we cut down for paper? The quiz for kids trivia games. The Guardian. 9 Canada. Carney survives 2 confidence votes on budget quashing fears of winter election. Canada. The Guardian. 10 Brazil. How thousands of fossil fuel lobbyists got access to UN climate talks and then kept drilling fossil fuels. The Guardian. RAWSEP. Coal plants are old and highly polluting, although not as polluting as industrial wood burning plants. Wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 and CO2 as coal burning. This is burning money. Department of Energy directs $100 million to modernize declining coal plants. The funding represents the Trump latest attempt at coal revitalization, but updating the aging facilities of the nation would cost billions. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. November 3rd, 2025. A Trump order to keep a Michigan coal plant running has cost $80 million. So far, a view of consumers. Energy. J.H. Campbell coal-fired power plant in West Olive, Michigan, the U.S. Department of Energy has announced up to $100 million in federal funding for projects modernizing the remaining coal plants in the nation, nearly half of which were slated to close by 2030. The investment, a fraction of what would be needed for a comprehensive upgrade, is unlikely to make coal power more affordable. Energy experts and advocates against coal say on Friday. U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright issued the notice of funding opportunity calling for applications to design, implement or test refurbishments and retrofit systems that allow coal plants to operate more efficiently, reliably, and affordably. The announcement outlined 3 key areas for development projects: advanced wastewater management systems that enable plants to switch between coal and natural gas, and advanced co-firing systems that allow simultaneous combustion of both fuel types. The funding comes just a month after the department announced $625 million to expand and reinvigorate the coal industry of America. That investment already included $350 million to recommission closed coal power plants or modernize plants, and $100 million for the 3 development areas outlined in the announcement Friday. The DOE did not respond to questions about why additional funds were announced just a month later. The Trump investments in coal are a drop in the bucket of what would realistically be needed to revamp the plants, said a manager in the Electricity Program at Energy Innovation, a nonpartisan energy and climate policy research firm based in San Francisco. Those types of retrofits for a single plant can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. To do that for every plant in the coal fleet, you are looking at billions of dollars, and you would be putting those billions of dollars into clunkers, literally burning that money. In April, following the Trump Beautiful Clean Coal executive order, the Department of Energy rolled out a series of actions intended to reinvigorate American coal production. The department reinstated the National Coal Council as a federal advisory committee, offered long-term financing for coal infrastructure, designated coal as a critical material and mineral, and ended a moratorium prohibiting new coal mining leases on federal land. The reliability of coal plants may be overstated by Trump. Between 2013 and 2024, forced outage rates, excluding planned outages for maintenance for coal, exceeded those for other major sources of electricity, including gas, nuclear, and hydroelectric power. According to a report by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, most coal plants in the U.S. were built before 1990. Keeping those plants running as they age requires more and more money, leading utilities to schedule retirement dates for nearly half of all plants. Solomon uses the analogy of car ownership to explain the decline of coal energy in the U.S. If you have a car that has 250,000 miles on it, very little is going to bring that car back to new. She said you can only do so much when the infrastructure is that old. 11 Brazil, the Lula Balancing Act. COP30 Amazon Summit juggles climate and social priorities. COP30 The Guardian. RAWSEP view halting the loss of forest will mean that less forest will be cut down to be burned, and there will be less air pollution from wood burning. From the article headline COP30 The Lula Balancing Act. COP30 Amazon Summit juggles climate and social priorities. The President of Brazil welcomes world leaders while navigating divided government, promising action on deforestation and emissions. How could the Tropical Forest Forever facility tackle deforestation? Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian. November 8, 2025. The President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has welcomed world leaders to Belém for the first climate summit in the Amazon, where conservationists hope he can be a champion for the rainforest and its people, but with a divided administration, a hostile Congress, and 20th century developmentalist instincts. This global figurehead of the center-left has a balancing act to perform in advocating protection of nature and a reduction of emissions at the opening of the summit on Thursday. He said his priority was social development, but humanity had to make an energy transition and halt the loss of forests. He said, "I am convinced that despite our difficulties and contradictions, we need roadmaps to in a fair and planned way reverse deforestation, overcome dependence on fossil fuels, and mobilize the resources necessary for these objectives." Those difficulties and contradictions have been starkly apparent in recent months, in which the government has announced impressive progress in reducing deforestation, while also pushing forward a number of projects that would open up the Amazon to extractivism. First, the good news: forest clearance in the Brazilian Amazon has fallen by 50% over the full 3 years of the Lula third term in office, the latest annual government figures show the smallest area of clearance in 11 years. This is largely thanks to the Environment Minister for Lula, Marina Silva, who has applied robust measures to counter land invasions, illegal logging, and wildcat mining. As a result, the Climate Observatory estimates the emissions of Brazil, which are mainly determined by the health of its forests, have fallen by 16.7%, likely to be the steepest fall of any of the G20 economies. These gains were front and center as Lula pitched for more nations to sign up to the Brazil flagship initiative at COP30, the Tropical Forest Forever facility, which aims to raise $125 billion, which is 95 billion English pounds, for the protection of standing forests. So far, the initiative has raised about $5.5 billion, with investments of $3 billion from Norway, $1 billion each from Brazil and Indonesia, and smaller sums from Portugal, the Netherlands, and other countries. The money is desperately needed to stave off the rapidly growing danger that the biggest tropical forest in the world will decline beyond a point of no return, after which it will be condemned to desiccate into a savanna. Senior scientists have warned that this is already happening in wide areas of the Amazon, particularly in the states of Mato Grosso, where there has been a rapid expansion of soy plantations, and Para, where the primary cause of destruction is the beef industry. The weakening of the forest has also been accelerated by fire, widely used for land clearance, and the contamination of rivers with mercury, which is used in gold mining. Others spoke of mass fish deaths due to the heat contamination and low water levels, and expressed fears that this will become worse when the river they depend on is privatized and turned into a canal for soy barges. These uncomfortable topics and their politically difficult solutions were not raised during the speeches until the very end of the Lula visit, when the Environment Minister Marina Silva asked for the microphone and reminded the President of Brazil why they were in the Amazon this month. COP30 is a place for us to say that Brazil will do its part eliminating deforestation, and the world needs to do its part reducing emissions of coal, oil, and gas. That is why I like it when, sir, you say it is necessary to stop depending on fossil fuels. This was a reminder that in Bolem, Lula, like many world leaders, will have a good forest angel on one shoulder and a fossil fuel demon on the other. The question is which will hold sway. 12 Brazil, over 100 U.S. leaders to attend COP30 climate summit as Trump stays away. COP30 The Guardian, over 100 U.S. leaders to attend COP30 climate summit as Trump stays away. Dozens of U.S. state and local leaders will be at talks in Brazil, with Trump team expected to send no representatives. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, November 7, 2025. November 2025. The Trump administration appears to be sitting out the November 2025 United Nations climate talks known as COP30. The Trump administration will not deploy any high-level representatives to the negotiations, but dozens of U.S. subnational leaders attend to promote their climate efforts. This includes the New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, along with more than 100 other state and local U.S. leaders organized by the subnational climate coalitions America Is All in Climate Mayors and the U.S. Climate Alliance. The group will also include the Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, and others. This is a mighty coalition representing some 2/3 of Americans, 3/4 of our GDP, and over 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, said Todd Stern, formerly special envoy for climate change under Barack Obama. States in the U.S. are competing in a friendly race to the top, working to slash planet heating pollution while boosting their economies. I hope that this is contagious, Governor Grisham said. The press call from Grisham came one day after elections across the U.S., which delivered broad success for Democrats and progressives. Over 30 climate mayors won last night, said Gina McCarthy, who served as a climate advisor to Joe Biden and environment chief under Obama. On the call, Grisham said New Mexico has in recent years increased oil and gas production but cut its methane output in half. Her policy approach supports the development and use of renewables and fossil fuels alike, which clean renewables Trump has turned away from. Yet top United Nations climate experts have long warned that climate action requires the rapid phase-out of fossil fuels. That is one reason Keanu Arpels Josiah, lead organizer with youth-led activist group Fridays for Future NYC, was so excited by the Zoran Mamdani win in the New York City mayoral election this week. Mamdani describes himself as an ecological socialist. Mamdani has been a vocal backer of policies to phase fossil fuels out of buildings and RAWSEP interjection. There is hope that Mamdani can be a backer of ending indoor residential and restaurant wood burning in New York City. And back to the article and efforts to stop the build-out of a gas pipeline at the climate talks. His organization will highlight the Mamdani win as a sign that Americans are ready for true climate justice aligned policy that pushes towards the end of fossil fuel extractivism. At COP30, nations will discuss the implementation of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, from which Trump pulled the U.S. on his first day back in office this year. In the days ahead of the negotiations, the U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum appeared to have visited the second largest offshore oil field in the world while in the United Arab Emirates, a signal that international climate efforts are not a priority. Still, concerns abound that officials will not ignore the climate talks completely, with some fearing they will attempt to thwart climate action from afar. But even if the Trump administration attempts to intervene, it will not be successful, said Stern. I do not know whether they will try to intervene in any way, but I honestly do not think countries here are going to care about it very much. He said countries of the world are in this agreement, and they are not leaving 13. United Kingdom RAWSEP view tax the rich rather than the poor. From the article headline, increase taxes for working people or make the very rich pay their fair share. The answer seems obvious, but not to Labour. Dan and James Triskandarija. The Guardian. 14. China poised to lift ban on chips exports to European car makers after U.S. deal. Automotive industry. The Guardian. Headlines. The New York Times. November 8, 2025. Artificial intelligence debt has entered the AI boom. The New York Times. Artificial intelligence. Is AI a journalist or just a newsroom tool? The New York Times. Artificial intelligence opinion. AI is already intelligent. This is how it becomes conscious. The New York Times. California Democrat House member alight in very dark days. Nancy Pelosi. And 8th. The New York Times. California 1. Casey means snake oil. New rules aim to broaden appeal of HSAs. The New York Times. To pay for Casey means alternative snake oil cures consumers. Ask Wirecutter, are there cheap products that are better than their pricey counterparts? Reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers. Beef. RAWSEP view Trump tariffs are to blame for high beef prices, but Trump is looking around for someone else to blame. From the article headline, as beef prices remain high, Trump calls for inquiry into meatpackers. The New York Times. Consumers books, the best thriller books to read right now. The New York Times. Consumers furniture fringe couches are the hottest new luxury decor. The New York Times. Consumers food recipes, Thanksgiving recipes for turkey, alternatives, NYT, cooking. Consumers photos. Was the Timothée Chalamet Vogue cover really so out of this world? The New York Times. Consumers shoes, we actually like these freaky toe shoes. Reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers watches the 3 best fitness trackers of 2025. Reviews by Wirecutter. Democrat Biden warns of a very dark moment as he hits out at Trump. The New York Times. Democrat Obama musical opinion. The new Obama musical is no Hamilton. The New York Times. Democrats scale back shutdown demands, but GOP digs in the New York Times. Dogs. Her research could improve training for service dogs. The New York Times. 2. Georgia. In an upset, Democrats oust 2 Republicans on the Georgia utility board. The New York Times. Human interest. What the TikTok bird theory says about relationships. The New York Times. 3. Idaho. As Idaho grows ever redder, Boise worries about its isolation. The New York Times. Jobs data. The job market is cooling but not collapsing according to private data. The New York Times. Kentucky UPS and FedEx ground MD-11 cargo planes after Louisville crash. The New York Times. Medicine and science. The DNA helix changed how we thought about ourselves. The New York Times. Medicine and science. He got dizzy and sick when he turned his head. Why? The New York Times. Medicine and science. Rise in kidney disease tied to other chronic conditions. Study finds. The New York Times. Medicine and science. What scientists are learning from brain organoids. The New York Times. Mexico. Nature. This is what a vindicated iguana looks like. The New York Times. Movie. How Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere uses the Jersey Diner as a cinematic device. The New York Times. Movie opinion. The father of Bruce Springsteen complicates a powerful American narrative. The New York Times. New York City RAWSEP view waste of money and hard to walk on. From the article headline, the NYC transportation crew helping preserve its cobblestone streets. The New York Times. New York City 2026 mayor among the Mamdani many upcoming challenges fixing the schools of New York City. The New York Times. New York mayor in 2026 live from New York. Zoran Mamdani has got jokes. The New York Times. New York mayor in 2026. Mamdani lives in a 1-bedroom. He could move to a 226-year-old mansion. The New York Times. New York mayor in 2026. The sprint for City Hall. The New York Times. New York City mayor in 2026. Zoran Mamdani and the revenge of the struggling yuppie. The New York Times. Oregon judge blocks National Guard from Portland and says Trump overstepped his authority. The New York Times. Republican for Dick Cheney, a journey from champion of war to voice of resistance. The New York Times. RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of medicine and science. Pfizer to acquire obesity drug startup Metsera in $10 billion deal. The New York Times. Science. Everyone is asking how Comet 3I Atlas got to our solar system. The New York Times. Trump actions. Federal judge rules against Trump officials on partisan email messages. The New York Times. Trump aviation sea, where flights have been canceled as government shutdown drags on. The New York Times. Trump and aviation interior secretary faces scrutiny for travel amid shutdown. The New York Times. Trump ballroom extension. The Kennedy Center crack up. The New York Times. For Trump being Trump, how the Trump administration is giving even more tax breaks to the wealthy. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts to fund tax breaks for the rich. Trump administration appeals to Supreme Court to block order to pay full SNAP benefits. The New York Times. 5 Trump versus clean energy. Trump can reconsider permit for offshore wind farm. Judge rules. The New York Times. Trump lawsuits for personal reasons. The Letitia James lawyers say fraud case against her was fueled by the Trump animus. The New York Times. Trump economy. The astonishing bull market will end one day. Are you ready? The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. Are post-Trump politics emerging? The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. Imagining what is in the Trump brain. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. Just how bad was the Trump very bad night? The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. The Trump dismantling of our democracy. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. Trump is resurrecting the Gatsby era? The hangover could be brutal. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025. The Trump vision of a Mar-a-Lago on the Potomac upends an American ideal. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. What started as affordability politics has become something deeper. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025 opinion. Will anyone play the king again? The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025. What I learned from the new globalists of an optimistic nation. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025. What we know about flight cancellations and air travel during the shutdown. The New York Times. U.S. elections November 4th, 2025. Who can collect food stamps? Fact-checking claims about SNAP eligibility and spending. The New York Times. Virginia teen narrowly defeats his former civics teacher in county election. The New York Times. Canada calls hundreds of ostriches as a court and a Kennedy fail to save them. The New York Times. Canada. The Trump tariffs scar Canadian city, where cars have been made for decades. The New York Times. 6 Brazil. Forward climate COP30 begins in. Brazil. The New York Times. 7 Jamaica solar power after Hurricane Melissa. Solar power kept the electricity on for some Jamaicans. The New York Times. Ukraine. Will Russians compete at the 2026 Winter Olympics? A look at where things stand. The athletic Hungary. Trump gives Hungary a reprieve on sanctions after meeting with Orban. The New York Times. Nigeria. Opinion. Trump aid cuts kill more Christians than jihadists. Do the New York Times. China medicine and science inside the China quest to defy aging with longevity labs and immortality islands. The New York Times. Headlines. The Guardian. November 8th, 2025. Consumers reading the best graphic novels of 2024. Best books of the year. The Guardian. Consumers. Sports. Trump ally Infantino to award first FIFA Peace Prize at World Cup draw in DC. World Cup 2026. The Guardian. Democrats just won back Latinos who voted for Trump. Will they be convinced to stick around? Democrats. The Guardian. Democrats. Leftist and centrist Democrats won on Tuesday. So what is the lesson for the party? Dustin Guastella. The Guardian. Democrats should celebrate this victories this week. But beware, Trump is already plotting his revenge. Jonathan Friedland. The Guardian. Democrats. A year after devastating Trump loss, have the Democrats begun to find their way back? Democrats. The Guardian. Human interest caught up in a violent attack. Would you be a hero or would you run? Both can be valuable. Emma Kavanaugh. The Guardian. Human interest. The couple married the longest in the world reveals key to a lasting relationship. We love each other. U.S. News. The Guardian. Illinois internet driver live streams herself on TikTok as she apparently hits and kills man in Chicago. The Guardian. Internet. Joy Reid on her ouster from MSNBC. In this moment, not being a part of corporate media is a gift. U.S. News. The Guardian. Internet. Meet Gen X. Middle-aged, enraged, and radicalized by internet bile. Gabby Hinsliff. The Guardian. Movie. My cultural awakening. The Big Lebowski inspired me to embrace unemployment culture. The Guardian. Musk is Tesla and Tesla is Musk. Why investors are happy to pay him $1 trillion. Elon Musk. The Guardian. Musk. Martin Rosen on the Elon Musk new pay package. Cartoon Martin Rosen. The Guardian. Musk. United Kingdom far-right Tommy Robinson. Elon Musk makes himself far-right fixture. Tommy Robinson after White House departure. Elon Musk. The Guardian. New York City 2026 Mayor Zoran Mamdani has upended U.S. politics. Now he should take on FIFA. The RAWSEP. FIFA is the soccer organization willing to give Trump a peace prize. FIFA. The Guardian. New York City 2026 Mayor Zoran Mamdani shows how Democrats can defeat authoritarians like Trump. Isabella Weber. The Guardian. New York City 2026 Mayor. The Zoran Mamdani win shows the power of mobilizing non-voters. Ben Davis. The Guardian. Ohio. Near Ohio Air Force Base food pantries and businesses grapple with effects of shutdown. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of science and medicine. RAWSEP. Moms should not be surprised that Trump and RFK Jr. administration and Congress supports U.S. food safety rollbacks. From the article headline Mom movement helps to kill bill seeking U.S. food safety rollbacks. U.S. politics. The Guardian. Sarcasm. Airline chaos looms across America. If only Democrats had less of a backbone. Dave Schilling. The Guardian. Sarcasm. Everybody panic. The workplace has become too feminized. Arwa Madawi. The Guardian. 8 Science. How many trees a day do we cut down for paper? The quiz for kids. Trivia games. The Guardian. Shutdown talk. Federal workers detail life without pay amid the closure of government. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. Trump budget cuts to fund tax breaks for the rich. Trump news at a glance. Supreme Court blocks full SNAP food aid payments following White House request. Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump healthcare. U.S. to demand countries share data on pathogens with epidemic potential in return for health aid. Global health. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. Businesses worldwide brace for extra Trump tariffs on steel imports. Trump tariffs. The Guardian. 9 Canada. Carney survives 2 confidence votes on budget quashing fears of winter election. Canada. The Guardian. Argentina. The Guardian. View on the Argentina election one step closer to becoming a Trumpian client state. Editorial. The Guardian. Brazil. The Guardian. View on worsening extreme weather. The injustice of the climate crisis grows ever clearer. Editorial. The Guardian. 10 Brazil. How thousands of fossil fuel lobbyists got access to UN climate talks and then kept drilling fossil fuels. The Guardian. Brazil. I wish we could ignore Bill Gates on the climate crisis, but he is a billionaire, so we cannot George Monbiot. The Guardian. 11 Brazil. The Lula Balancing Act. COP30 Amazon Summit juggles climate and social priorities. COP30. The Guardian. 12 Brazil. Over 100 U.S. leaders to attend COP30 climate summit as Trump stays away. COP30. The Guardian. Guyana. South America in turmoil after opposition leader arrested and faces U.S. extradition. Guyana. The Guardian. Mexico. Women. The president of Mexico is groped in broad daylight. Mexican women cry Me Too. Mona El Tahai. The Guardian. Australian. Nature. The Premier. The poet and the fight to save an extraordinary Australian frog. Amphibians. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Right-wing Boris Johnson trying to undermine BBC leadership. Insiders fear after leak. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom healthcare. The right wants to destroy our fragile faith in the NHS. Do not let that happen. Polly Toynbee. The Guardian. United Kingdom. My verdict on the woke review of the school curriculum in England. It is not radical enough. Simon Jenkins. The Guardian. 13 United Kingdom. RAWSEP. View tax the rich rather than the poor. From the article headline Increase taxes for working people or make the very rich pay their fair share. The answer seems obvious, but not to Labour. Dan and Jane Striskenderija. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Sarcasm and cynicism. TV. At last a great institution filled with trusted public figures. Shame the traitors. Do not run Britain. Marina. Hide. The Guardian. RAWSEP. View. The celebrity traitors drew to a magnificent close this week and prove that these lying double-crossers are of a far finer caliber than our MPs. United Kingdom. Sarcasm. BBC 100 fake news, says the Trump press secretary. BBC. The Guardian. Ukraine. Russian missile attacks on Ukrainian energy facilities kill at least 4 Ukraine. The Guardian. South Africa. Trump says U.S. will boycott G20 summit in South Africa citing treatment of white farmers. Trump. The Guardian. Tanzania. Police arrest opposition party official after deadly election protest. Tanzania. The Guardian. China. The Guardian. View on Trump and China stepping back from the brink but not solving problems. Editorial. The Guardian. 14 China poised to lift ban on chips exports to European carmakers after U.S. deal. Automotive industry. The Guardian. China. U.S. and China seek to project power with huge and expensive aircraft carriers. China. The Guardian. Taiwan. Vice President presses case at EU Parliament for joint efforts to counter China. Taiwan. The Guardian.
Red-green fox here. The quick red-green fox jumped over the barriers clean air. Red Green Fox here, ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1. Biofuel Watch. 2. Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3. Kommite Schöne Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4. Dogwood Alliance. 5. Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6. Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7. Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8. Per County and NARS.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view. PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.